morning, everyone. This is our first panel of day 2 here on stage 1, and we're discussing a topic you might have heard of, generative AI. Not sure if you've heard of that. Not much about it in the press these days. And we've got a fantastic panel joining us to discuss some of the trends and how generative AI can also help with sustainability. So could I have the speakers onto the stage, please? Thank you. Please. Okay, so just to introduce our speakers. In fact, no, I'll let you do it yourselves. Why not? Michelle, starting with you, if you please introduce yourself and say what company you're from and your role, please.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Michelle Davies, and I'm a partner with EY. I am the global head of sustainability in law. So I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for over 30 years, and I've been specializing in sustainability for over 20 years. And I think this area around generative AI and sustainability is probably going to be one of our biggest focus areas of the next 12 months for reasons that we can discuss. I think it throws up a whole host of legal issues. And why is that interesting to everyone here? Because where there's blame, there's a claim. And I think the law in this instance will have a big impact on the future of generative AI.
Sandeep?
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, very happy to see you all here and the audience in the virtual stuff. And so thank you, everyone. Before I go there, introducing myself, I think so we were just discussing just behind the scenes saying that, how the climate is really making a lot of impact otherwise. So we were discussing about the fires happening specifically now in US and in the New Zealand part of it. Then climate change in London itself, we were speaking about fans. Then we were also looking at the aspect of the country where I come from, India, the floods devastating the whole cities itself. So climate change has become, something which was always thought to be a future is just happening now. So from that perspective, how do we really bring in technology and use this technology to our favorable aspects? That's a place where I think so generative AI would really help us. So to brief about myself, I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for Tech Mahindra. And just to add here, I may be the longest serving Chief Sustainability Officer for any country or any company otherwise. I've been in this role for almost about 16 years. So I always have a fight with my HR saying that you have not promoted me, but this is how it is. And in this journey, while we have really gone from starting from nowhere till where we are today, we have never taken the help of a consultant. So whatever we have done of our own. And very proudly today I stand in front of you, or where I'm sitting in front of you now, is that we proudly lead the world in ESG space, whether you look at the benchmarks. So I have been able to drive this kind of an initiative within Tech Mahindra. Thank you.
Thank you. And good morning, everybody. My name is Jillian Moore. I am the Global Executive Sponsor for Sustainability at a company called Avanade, which is a joint venture between Accenture and Microsoft. And I also run our global advisory services business there. So we are very focused on helping organizations make the most of Microsoft technologies, but particularly from a business process and also a human impact point of view, and not just the actual technology piece. And I personally am very, very passionate about the point where humans meet technology and what that means and what it's going to mean for the human race going forward and how all that comes together. We are also hugely pivoting around Gen AI this year, no surprise to anybody, particularly given Microsoft's focus on it. But I think there is a very interesting question around what that means for human beings and how we embrace that and where we go with it. And as Sandeep mentioned, we've just spent quite a few minutes chatting, and we've covered every topic under the sun, from climate change to technology to people to flexible working. So fascinated to see where we go on this panel. It's a huge topic that could go off anywhere, and interested to see what we're going to cover.
Absolutely, like you said, we could talk all day about this topic, right? It could be in a show in itself. Now, there's an idea for 2024. Okay, so Jillian, I'm going to start with you, actually. So let's talk about this, and I'm going to pick up on the human meets technology interface later on. But how can generative AI technologies, in broad terms, be harnessed to address sustainability challenges?
Huge question. I mean, there's a massive amount of potential in Gen AI technologies, which is why everybody's getting so excited about it at the moment, and the press is going huge. The step change from ordinary AI into Gen AI is this ability to create new things off the back of the data and the intel, and not just interpret it, but actually take it somewhere else and do something different. And when you look at sustainability and the ongoing challenges that we have to address, which, let's face it, nobody has cracked yet, we have not found the answers to a lot of the sustainability challenges out there. Gen AI gives us another chance to look at different ways of doing it. It gives us another chance to use data and technology to create new ways forward, to create new options, to predict things we couldn't predict before, to model and build things that are intrinsically more sustainable. And so there is a massive potential there. For me, the challenge, though, is still how we harness that potential. For all the hype, it's a technology in its infancy, and it's something that we still have to get to grips with, and it's still only as good as how you prompt it and what you put in there. And so there is a lot of work to be done to really get it into the place where it can help, but the potential is huge.
That's a really important point, though, isn't it? Because the decisions that could be taken on the back of Gen AI, particularly around climate scenario planning, are potentially humongous. And if the data that's going in, for example, isn't sufficiently accurate or complete, or the unintended impact that it could have hasn't been really thought through, that impact could be quite seriously damaging as well. I mean, you would hope that the way it will develop won't result in that, but I think in the sustainability space and the climate space, because the end impact is potentially so huge, the need to get it right is all the more important.
It is, but I think also we're going to reach the point quite quickly where the fallibility of AI, it's more reliable than the fallibility of humans. You know, we still have this problem now where do people trust robots to do things like medical, replace doctors and so on. The reality is that statistically, the technology is more accurate, makes fewer problems than the human beings. So we will soon get to that point where the thing that's stopping us using it is our own trust levels as opposed to the accuracy of it. But there are many steps, and I know with you coming from a legal background, the legal and the ethical implications are huge about where we're going with it.
And the ethical concerns me as well in terms of the potential for bias and unjust individual results, because of course at the end of the day the AI ultimately impacts us as individuals, and that's an area of concern. And I'm absolutely convinced we will see a significant amount more regulation around this.
So Scott, just to add to that, you know, we were just mentioning about how complex it is. So, you know, all of us know that, you know, how the data for scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 is being really looked at. We were also discussing off-share about this, was that look at the scope 3, how we are really calculating the data. Say we were taking an example of, say, employee commute. So if there are, say, about 1 lakh employees who are working for a company, and you have to look for their scope 3 employee commute data, one day that person would be coming on a bicycle, next day on a car, or maybe another day with a shared pool. Every day there is going to be a bit of change. And with this humongous data, how are you going to estimate? And if you're taking a decision on that estimated data, look at the complexity of the whole problem. So the challenge is to get the data as accurate, to get the structures in place which will really get that data as right as possible, and then it helps you in decision making. When the generative AI is going to come in, it is going to pump on that data. So every organization, every country, every city first has to look at how do you get that data right for scope 1, scope 2, scope 3.
Yeah.
And that is the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
And that's where the tools or the companies who are really working on platforms, they have to play a major and a crucial role. And then, of course, the ethical part of it, saying that, the biases have to be really looked at. If a bias is on a particular region or a particular, particular data set, then again you will have a wrong interpretation of the whole data.
Yeah, I think back to the question of how it enables, though, the point about ethics and regulation, as you say, is super key. But there's also a very fine balancing act between that and innovation and driving new things.
Yes.
And one of the things I get fascinated about is instances of innovation in history where to move things forward, things that we would consider unethical have probably happened. Like if you look at how vaccines were developed, for instance, and some of the ways they were tested. But we've got to look at what we can do with AI and Gen AI and say, right, at which point are we concerned about this because the quality of the data is bad, we don't understand the outputs, there's an ethical and regulation consideration, versus we have to take a risk because it's going to allow us to do something new and find an answer for this problem that we have not been able to crack before now. And I don't know that there's a flat out answer to that. I think it's very much a case-by-case situation. And how, as we're embracing this, do we look at those elements?
Look, I'm a lawyer, so I'm
You're
not.
going to go the other way.
I'm not. Well, but also, I'm not. A consultant like you, and I will always defer to my colleagues in EY, who are far more expert at at this than me. But if I look at some of the challenges that we're facing now, the ability, though, there are some. Well, there are 2 points. The first point is, one of the challenges we have right now is getting low-cost capital into, for example, the decarbonisation of the world at large. It's quite difficult. If AI can create more accurate predictions on how a decarbonisation solution is going to work, and it can actually make that solution work more effectively. So one, it can more accurately predict, but two, it can actually result in a better decarbonisation product. What I'm really excited about is the ability to attract lower cost capital, because you are creating a more certain opportunity, in particular for institutional capital, which needs that sort of annuity style certainty of return. So I'm really excited about that, and also I'm really excited about its use in decentralized solutions, because in most developed markets the grid is really overburdened. Centralized grid systems are massively overburdened. You've got EV becoming more used, and in particular you've got electric heat and electric cooling systems being used, and that's placing a massive burden. And then in less developed markets you don't have a centralized grid, so you might have fuel poverty because people just simply can't access energy poverty rather, not fuel poverty. And so we are gradually shifting towards a decentralized energy solution in most markets, and the ability for generative AI to really improve those systems is huge. Not just for people like us in the UK and in Europe, but for people living in poorer countries where they are more dependent on off-grid solutions. So I'm quite excited about those two specific applications, getting lower cost capital in, which speeds up the transition, and helping that transition move more towards a decentralized solution. I don't know what are you seeing that in the work that you're doing?
Yeah.
You were nodding when I said lower cost capital.
Yes. So the point here is, even otherwise you leave apart the technology, the kind of impact that is being created with this climate change and other SNG also are humongous. Really, that's what you really pointed out in the start itself. That impacts are very huge. Means one hurricane, you could look at the cost of impact. The floods have kind of washed away the cities, and rebuilding those cities. If you had Gen AI, if you could have predicted that data well in advance, looking at whatever learning, all those things could have been stopped. So, but idea here is that if the funds have to be put in, the funds have to be put in now. Now, where have those, or from where those funds will come in is a bit of challenge, whether it is a company or whether it's a country or whether it's a city. Where will they get those funds? These are humongous funds, whether it is in EV or whether it is in solar. So, every place, those funds are going to be a major challenge.
One of the consequences, though, so if we just look at flooding and fires, they're risks, and the more that Gen AI can predict the likelihood of flooding, the likelihood of fires, that is going to make certain, that is going to make access to certain products impossible, for example, insurance. And so there's an awful lot to unpack here. I mean, that's what you were saying at the beginning. There's an awful lot to unpack here, but that is one of the consequences. I have a friend who has got a senior position within one of the insurance companies, and she was saying that they're now able to predict that 1 in 4 homes in the UK will be uninsurable because of climate risk. And they're able to do that because of Gen AI. Now, that is what it is, but Gen AI is creating that visibility on a very real problem. And maybe what it's doing is it's giving us the run-up to be able to deal with it before it actually happens. But it is, it's going to have a lot of unintended consequences, and that's just a very real life example of one.
It almost sounds like Gen AI is going to open cans of worms everywhere.
Yeah.
So, we might be looking for Gen AI to provide some solutions, but it almost sounds like it might be going to create more problems.
But those worms are already in the can, and it's so I would say what it's giving us the opportunity to do is open the can early so we can deal with it better, rather than that can being opened further down the line when maybe you can't do any, you to do something about it will be far more costly and not necessarily as effective.
But you could argue, for instance, that there's lots of things happening at the moment that we're ignoring. We're keeping, sorry about the worms analogy, we're keeping the worms in the cans at the moment in lots of ways in the world. Do we actually want to open those cans? Getting a bit philosophical here. Right?
We were having a conversation very similar to this before, because we were talking about, it's not just Gen AI that does that, technology does that, right? Technology for the last hundreds of years has been opening cans of worms in changing what we do and how we live and how society is built and what we have to do. And we were talking earlier about the balance of having a society that keeps people employed and brings value into the society versus technology doing everything. And Gen AI is just an extension of that. I think ultimately we will reach a point where it kind of equals itself out. There will be some things that we can do, but we won't, because it's not cost effective or the results don't justify what it's done, or there'll be something in society that means we have to balance it out. And there'll be some things that we can do that really make a difference. And as humans and as society and as governments, we will adapt in to make that happen. So I think one of the challenges we have at the moment with Gen AI, because it's so new and we don't really understand the potential of where we can go with it, despite all the hype, we don't know the answer to where it's going to equalise out in terms of what we will do with it. What we can do is just about anything. If you're inspired enough and you've got enough money to do it, you can do just about anything. Whether we will do it is an entirely different question.
Sandeep, what do you think? What's the priority that we should be focusing on when we're talking about utilising Gen AI from a sustainability point of view?
See, one thing which I clearly started with was with the data. Data has to be put in right place so that the decisions will happen rightly. Second aspect is also on awareness. People have to be aware that if Gen AI is going to come in, it's going to look at the data. It will have issues around privacy. You're going to do that data analysis on a lot of that private data. There are going to be security risks as well on this data. So the awareness among the society has to be there that this is a place where we want to be, and this is a place where we will reach by all these initiatives. So that aspect is the second thing. The third very important aspect would be to look at how it is really impacting the society. We also mentioned that the human touch part of it.
Yes.
The human touch is totally gonna miss out. So an oversight of a human being is very, very important. Otherwise, the Gen AI is going to be, the decisions are going to be wild. So until somebody who's really giving a human touch or having look at these decisions is very, very important. So Gen AI with human oversight is what we are saying.
Michelle?
I just want to pick up on points that you each made. So the human piece and the accuracy of AI against humans. How important, though, do you think that for Gen AI to deliver what it has the potential to deliver, it has to, at each stage in the process, be interacting with humans? So, for example, with the policymakers, with the scientists, with whatever stakeholders are actually going to ensure that the AI is delivering what we need it to and isn't having an unintended consequence. And how do, because again, I am a lawyer, how do you build that into the, sorry, I'm asking you, doing your job for you, but how do you build that into the process of utilising AI most effectively?
I mean, at the moment, the answer is a lot, because, as Sandeep says, the data is immature. I mean, Gen AI is not some miracle addition. There's been problems for years around the data that underlies sustainability and having the quality to do things. So at the moment, a lot. But over time, the beauty of Gen AI is that it learns and becomes, it's self-generating.
Yeah.
So for the next few years, there's probably a huge amount of interaction that's needed. But if it's done properly and it starts to learn, then it starts to become self-generating. And we end up in that world where it's more accurate and you don't need so much human input. Again, I think because it's so new, none of us know how long that will take and where that line will get to. But at the moment, there's all sorts of things. I mean, there's a whole new skill that we're all going to have to learn as human beings. We've over the last 15 years, we've all had to learn how to search and learn search capabilities, like how to use Google and so on.
Yeah.
The next one is going to be, how do we become prompt engineers? How do we put the right things into Gen AI to get the right things out of it? Totally different skill set that everyone's going to have to learn. But we will, at the moment, we'll come up with ideas of what you can do using Gen AI. Like, do you want to design a whole new sustainable city plan based on data from before? We can do that, but there'll be a lot of interaction. But by the time you're doing that for the 20th or the 50th or the 100th time, the human interaction will be minimal because it will have learned as it goes along.
Taking up this theme around the interaction between AI, Gen AI, and humans is the ability to utilize Gen AI to help change behaviours. So one of the big challenges we have in sustainability, because I work 100% in sustainability, so I was on a panel earlier where we were discussing this, one of the biggest challenges is operationalising sustainability throughout an organisation and not just housing it within a chief sustainability officer and saying, right, that's it, we're done. It actually has to come across and infiltrate every single part of an organisation if that organisation is to reduce risk and access value. But in order to do that, as well as doing a whole host of other things, everybody has to think differently and behave differently. And that's just within an organisation. If you look at how people live and work more broadly and operate as individuals, that change has to happen. So I'm really interested in your take on that piece as well, and what dangers and negatives that actually potentially presents if you are using AI generative AI rather, to influence behaviour and change it.
Should I? Okay. So two parts, before I forget, it was, see, the prompts that we were just speaking about, the prompts have to mature now. They have to start seeing that, as we said, if you give a prompt, I need a sustainable city, or, so those kind of analysis will start happening, those kind of, the models will start coming in. But based on the data, whatever we provide, so learning will happen, but those prompts have to now start coming in where we say the net zero part of it. Now the prompts are more around stakeholders, but as soon as the prompts would change around, say, net zeros, or maybe sustainable cities, or sustainable finance, or the legal sustainable finance. So all those aspects will play a major role around it. Now, coming to the second point where we said that, how the humans would play a major role here, it would be around whatever we have learned the last maybe 20, 30 decades of learning, if that can be balanced out in one way or the other and could be put as a learning process, that is a place where it will have a major impact.
Okay. Yeah, and I would also pick up on the embedded sustainability point as well, right? So I completely with you, completely agree. The way forwards for improving some of the sustainability stuff is around how we embed it in everything we do,
yes.
and not, we're talking here about some use cases that are specifically sustainability use cases, but actually there's way more potential, and there will be bigger usage of Gen AI in other parts of our world in terms of how people do their jobs and how we create things, that if we embed a sustainability mindset in how that Gen AI is being created in those parts, actually will drive us much bigger gains than just looking at specific sustainability initiatives. And if you think about the number of man hours Gen AI will reduce to create reports or create outputs and so on, that has a direct input on things, direct effect on things like carbon footprints and so on. And nobody's really thinking about it in that way at the moment. But actually, if we bring the sustainability agenda to where Gen AI is being used elsewhere, there are far bigger gains to be had.
And just to adding to that, now again, Gen AI has to start picking up again the sustainable ways. Now, if you are making the models, or if you're putting the infrastructure, maybe the data centers or maybe the servers around us who are really now learning the Gen AI part of it. So you'll have to see that here also, how do you start using the renewable energy? Otherwise, the emissions itself in the whole process would be so humongous that it will be very difficult to capture at any point of time. So what in short I'm trying to say is that there is a Gen AI. Now this Gen AI is going to make some kind of models. To generate those models, the carbon emissions emitted during that whole process will be a big challenge. So we have to start thinking about it right now, because it's going to be a very lengthy process, and we are just at the start.
Okay, I want to throw one more question in here. We've talked briefly about risk and trust. Do you feel that we're at a tipping point now, with everything that's happening, that we have to start taking some risks and adopting AI and embracing AI?
Wrong question to ask a lawyer, but I'll comment later after others have.
I'm the other end of the spectrum. It's probably good having us apart. I'm an innovation person and a digital person, so I'm like, yeah, for sure. Because how do we develop? How do we move forwards? We already are taking risks with it. And how do we find new benefit? You can't solve any problem with new ideas unless you take some risks and you push some envelopes. So yeah, I'm like super pro. I'm let's go all in and try some things and take those risks. The question is more though, how do we get prepared for the impact of those risks to make sure that we can mitigate them? But yeah, I'm pro. I'm like, let's go there. Let's go do something.
Sandeep, you're sitting in the middle. Are you going to
Yes.
sit in the fence,
So
or?
I'm totally with her, and we
They're
have
gonna
to.
gang up.
Yes. So I think so. This is the right time. As I said, why I started the whole conversation to start is, I was trying to give an impact. So if we don't take the steps now, if we don't take the risks now, we are not going to improve in next 1 century itself. And we will be there for 1 century itself. That itself is going to be a question mark if we don't take this risk now. And all the points that I really set out, whether it is the emissions from all the various aspects, if all those we have mitigated, the funds we have really brought in, then it's a matter of just winning it. So it's just step-by-step process. You have a risk, you have a mitigation plan, and here you achieve your target.
Exactly. So I've been a lawyer for over 30 years, and I don't think I've worked on anything that has been without risk. So the job of a lawyer, or a good lawyer at least, is not to eradicate risk. That's impossible. What we have to do with Gen AI is what we do with any other risk. We have to have accuracy about what the risk is. So that means complete honesty about the extent of the risk. We have to have visibility and transparency. It has to be open and understood. And only if you've got those two factors, you've got absolute certainty about what the risk is. You may not have certainty on the outcome, because otherwise it wouldn't be a risk. But you've got certainty on what the risk is. You've got transparency and visibility. You can look at it. Only then can you work out what your risk management strategy is to either reduce that risk, to manage that risk. You will never, though, eradicate it. So it is about that. And I think the important thing to recognise is that all of this will be very dynamic. It will change. So what will be seen as a risk 1 year won't be maybe in 2 years' time, because that risk management strategy will be understood and people will have got their heads around it. Capital would have got their heads around it. They will have priced it. And we will move on to what the next risk is. But it will be dynamic. And even those original risks will evolve and change. And it's important, I think, to have, honesty, so that we have complete visibility around what the risk is. And as I say, only then can you ever manage it. Yeah. And that's the bit that worries me, if I'm honest with you, about Gen AI, is having access to that completeness around where the potential risks are.
So you said the point right was the transparency. If everybody is transparent, open, I think so that is the key here.
Sorry?
The transparency in terms of, how the data, or whether it is, what are the impacts. Yes. If those things are very transparently brought about by the aspects when we are making the apps, or when we are making the softwares or the tools, I think so once the transparency is there, I think so that's going to play a major role.
Yes, I agree.
I think also there's the chance that we actually never will get to that point. But the flip side of the coin is we have some very real sustainability problems in the world that we are not solving at the moment, right? And they are serious, and we have to do something, and we have to do something different, and we have to find some new answers.
Yeah.
And if this gives us that option, then is the risk and the unknowing worth it? Because this is a whole new inspiration for things that we can do that wasn't possible before, and we have to do something.
That's
different.
a great point.
Yes.
And it is a balancing act. And I don't know about everyone in the audience, but I sense that there has been, because I've been in this sector for so long, I've lived and breathed it for over 20 years, and I'm so close to it and have operated globally. I really sense that we are at a tipping point where people, and I think COVID in a way helped with this, because it showed us what a global catastrophe can look like. COVID we could sort of manage. Climate change is to a large degree now out of our control, and an awful lot is about adaptation. But there is stuff that is within our control, and we should be doing everything we can to stop it getting worse. But my sense is that we are at a point where people appreciate that what we've been doing to date isn't working, and we do have to do some new things which will carry with it a degree of risk. And I completely agree with you, and there is going to be a balancing, but it's going to be at a policy level, and governments are going to have to make some quite difficult decisions.
They are.
Okay, as I said at the beginning, we could talk about this all day, but we simply don't have the time. So please join me in thanking our panel. That's Michelle, Sandeep and Jillian.
Okay.